Good morning, welcome to my channel. I'm Dr. Kiritsis, and today I'll be giving a short exposition on the winning entry of the It's All Greek to Me writing competition. First and foremost, I would like to commend all those who attempted one of the two essay questions prescribed by the It's All Greek to Me writing competition, a contest which commenced at the end of July and finally concluded on the 23rd of October. I do acknowledge that the questions themselves were anything but a cakewalk, and so my sincerest commendations go out to all those who made an attempt. For those who may have forgotten, entrants were required to answer one of the following. History is the study of our collective memories. It evaluates our evolutionary path by looking at the consequences of decisions made by the administrative order of our day. In studying these consequences, we strive to better ourselves and the human condition, so that the world might be made a better place for the lives of our children and their children and so forth. Sadly, for anyone studying the subject long enough, it becomes clear that we continue to make the same mistakes over and over and over again. So if we've been made aware of these mistakes through historical analysis, then why do we continue to make them? And you have to discuss. And the second one was, what we find in history is that the prevailing culture of the times usually appropriates quantitative science or religion or a syncretization of both to assert the undisputed reality of its own cosmogony, and to declare the cosmogonies of all other cultures that have come beforehand to be either erroneous, inferior, or primitive. Interestingly, when we study history, we see that what constitutes and defines law and knowledge in one era is rudely dismissed or banished by insights and developments of a subsequent era. In light of this, would it be right to assume that our knowledge, our reality, the world as seen through our eyes, is more real than that which defined the world of our ancient ancestors? And you had to discuss. Needless to say, I thoroughly enjoyed reading and marking all of them. There were many different perspectives offered, with many entrants disputing and outright challenging the validity of academic inquiry into history itself. Most entries chose to dissect the first question, which is understandable given that the second required an intense and rigorous investigation into the hermeneutics of culture. All in all, the metaphysical, psychological and philosophical trajectories offered were immensely satisfying. There was a lot of deep thought out there. Though, as I have already stipulated in an earlier blog on essay structure, the mechanics employed were mostly below par, if not absent altogether. I was quite forgiving of minor grammatical errors, but entries were heavily docked for the absence of any structure. So, the criteria which I used to mark the entries were as follows. The first one was content, including originality of thought, use of voice, standard vocabulary and usage. The second one was mechanics and organization, including the mechanical correctness and the presence of structure. And the third one was consistency and methodology, comprised of a fundamental ability to sustain and argue a point effectively, as well as the ability to maintain a sympathetic approach to historiographical issues and analysis. I placed greater emphasis on originality, structure and the acknowledgement of historiographical problems posed by either question. The winner of the competition, Joseph Paraskandalo, scored highly in all areas. His entry was exactly what I was looking for, and I'll explain why. First and foremost, Joseph clearly indicated which essay question he was answering. This should be the first thing the participant addresses. He or she must obviously bring to the judge's attention what he or she is writing about. It's startling that many of the entries made no such mention of this. More importantly, though, Joseph's essay response was structured quite well and unravelled in a clear and logical manner. It was very easy to follow his argument. He begins by defining the concept of history as a construct of the Western mind, explicating that it is, in his words, a general term utilized to reference an account of a past experience or event, expressed both causally and formally. He also places it within the context of the essay question. The purpose of history is to, again in his words, provide a viable and true representation of human experience that occurred before the current time, with the view and hope it will serve to both enlighten and edify to render an insight to both the good and the bad that has transpired over the passage of time. Then he anatomically dissects it, exploring the relationship between history and reality, history and myth, as well as history and conspiracy theory, concepts which in the contemporary world have become rather blurred. Hence, we have an engagement of the hermeneutics of culture, modern culture, an observation I was keenly looking for. In addition, Joseph's response takes into careful consideration the historiographical issues which beg to be addressed. Conventional written history is indeed written by these socio-political warriors, the sons of Ares as I call them, and is therefore biased and flawed. Furthermore, because the accounts have been written, reasoned, and explained away by the aggressors, they can usually offer no new perspectives for politico-social and religious cohesion. It's an unbroken chain where the torch is passed on from one Aryan race to the next, over and over and over again. Joseph draws attention to this when he explains that, in his words, it is these refuted sources of distortion to the historical record, the minds of men, impose on the manner and accounting of history that contributes significantly to the repetitious failing of humankind to overcome through remedy its shortcomings to achieve a truly civilized, sociologically harmonious existence. From the perspective of metaphysics and social philosophy, history itself has been paved by the masculine aesthetic, which seeks expression through the subjugation of nature, and often involves mass destruction and the loss of life. This form of consciousness has its roots in the supposition that domination is divine, and hence to practice it is heroic, noble, and transcendental. Joseph brings attention to this tenet later on, when he elucidates that, in his words, a major factor in the continual barbarism of man lies in the inherently violent nature of human beings, driven by ego that plays a significant factor in discounting any lessons attributable to historical experience, no matter how egregious the account. The statement itself betrays an awareness of the anatomical structure of masculine aesthetic consciousness, or what Western analytical psychology terms the ego, the resident of the dominant left-hand hemisphere of the brain, that burns and judges, differentiates, divides and compartmentalizes, sets up social barriers, norms and convictions and other false forms of truth, not conducive to unity and togetherness. This was the thematic overture I was after, and it was present in Joseph's entry. He also correctly alludes to the historical record as a socio-political or cultural thermometer, which measures the reality of any one specific time against all those that have gone beforehand. As a thermometer is powerless to predict the behaviour and vacillation of liquid mercury, so too is any historical record incompetent when it comes to correctly predicting or mediating the future. Or as he says, in his words, it is just that, a document of record and not a viable source to reason or rationalise humanity's future actions. His conclusion not only recapitulates his main contention, but draws attention to the psychodynamics of personal and collective history. In other words, the microcosm and macrocosm as a pale reflection of the human psyche itself. Mirrored in the annals of history, human nature itself is immeasurable and unquantifiable. Thus, any attempt by anthropologists to apply the workings of the oral and written past, itself a one-dimensional overview, to the present and future for the sake of prediction, mediation, and the betterment of the human condition is futile. This brings us back to the Hermetic and alchemical tenet, as above, so below, and as inner, so outer. The fundamental laws governing both are the same, so it makes sense that a personal history can and might indeed mirror the course of collective or global history. He sums up his main contention well and provides a pertinent concluding line. These are his words. Humanity's history will not serve to alter its ways. It will only serve as a faulty tool to mirror its shortcomings. I really like that. In all, a conscientious, well-written and shrewd response, sympathetic to the historiographical issues, the multidimensional definition of history, as well as the hermeneutics of culture. Well done, Joseph. And on that note, I will see you next time.